So the question is, how is that going to impact the lacrosse world if whatever would come to fruition comes to fruition? Let's bring in Chris Marshall now to get some more perspective on this. Chris, I know there's a lot of different things being floated around about this, what it really means, but in your eyes, what possibly would this mean for lacrosse?
I think essentially means nothing for lacrosse in large part. I think when you talk about paying athletes and you talk about likeness and other pieces like that, that's more speaking about the money sports. And I think when you talk about the scholarships that are at play as well, that's something that doesn't really fall into the realm of lacrosse. I mean, when you've got a handful of scholarships over the course of 40 or 50 players, like you do for lacrosse, I can only think of one guy over the past couple of years that I know got a full scholarship. So a lot of it's sectioned out. And, I think you need to be in a place where you're generating money, a year in the black. And I think that generally speaking, lacrosse programs are probably in the red in terms of what they're doing for the athletic department. So I don't think it'll have a whole lot of impact. I also think when you look at, the schools that are successful in lacrosse, I think you have students that really value the education and think of lacrosse as something that's a sport and something that they enjoy to do, that they enjoy doing, and that they can continue to do while they're pursuing their education, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, which makes it, like you said, makes it probably a little bit different than some athletes in some of the bigger money sports. I've seen a few different people with this conversation about the impact of the pro game now. If a company or two wanted to instead invest more in maybe a couple of college guys who have grown their brand there, do you see that maybe hurting, helping the pros, or what's your perspective on that?
Anytime somebody can grow their brand, while they're in school, I think it's good for the pro game of lacrosse. I think it's hugely important. And now I think we're seeing with the PLL, guys who have really made a concerted effort, building their brand with intention. And I think we've seen guys over the past. I think Kyle Harrison's done a great job. I think Rob Pennell's done a great job. Obviously, you got guys like Paul Rabel, but I think you look at the guys coming out, guys like Trevor Baptiste that had a pretty big following that were able to build that. There's another guy, Stelio Crudis, right now, who's at Villanova, who's got a pretty big following on social media and through his YouTube channel. And you're able to follow what he's doing as well. So I think now we're seeing a smarter, more savvy athlete using their platform. And I think that's what it comes back when you're looking at some of the likeness rules and things like that, which I think should be more acceptable in a guy like Stelio's position, where you be able to generate some revenue based on something that you're building and working towards in terms of your personal brand. So I think brand building within the collegiate game, especially using the platform of national television like they get on successful teams, is something that can only help the game across the board.
You mentioned Trevor Baptiste, who took it from the college game to the next level. Interesting you brought up that name, Stelios, and you would expect maybe like a Grant Ament or a Michael Sowers or maybe even a Dox Aiken. Those guys who are going to be rising seniors this year might be the next sort of in that same mold, or is it maybe going to be another guy like you mentioned?
Well, I think it depends, and I think you look at. I think there are different categories. I think you look at the guys who are the top players in the game, who are using their ability and their God-gifted talent to be able to take their image to the next level. And I think you see other guys who are maybe not quite in that same level in terms of where they at productively on the field, where they can use other soft skills and abilities that they have, in conjunction with their athletic ability to go and help build their brand. So, I think there's two different kind of ways that you look at this, but I think, like I said, anything you can do to help, expose more people to the sport and expose people to their personal brands is something that's important. So obviously, I don't want to discount what any of these guys are doing, but I think there's two different routes that we're seeing when you look at those guys. And the way that they're approaching it. But I think any of those guys that you mentioned, even a Jeff Teat who's coming out, has the capability to move the needle for a sponsor at the next level. And I think, you look at a company like Epic Lacrosse, who's been able to sneak in and grab a couple of guys who've kind of fallen through the cracks. A guy like Matt Rambo, who's an Epic guy. Jared Newman is another guy. Sexton. You look at some of these guys that with a small brand based in Minnesota, that they've been able to build their portfolio by taking advantage of some guys who have good personalities and are also skilled on the field. So I think you look for a combination. of ability both on the field and personality off it, and that's where you really see the magic come through.
Well, like you said, there's some guys who their talent just sticks out. And the first guy, I know he's playing basketball now, but Pat Spencer, a guy who now not overly active on social media or anything like that, but when he's on the field or now on the court, everyone sits back and watches a money player. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think there are guys that are just like that. I mean, I think you look across the board in different sports. I mean, you look at a guy like Mike Trout, who is insanely talented, but doesn't really buy into some of the things that are going on social media. And I think that's a missed opportunity for him. And I think with a guy like Pat Spencer, like you said, it's a beautiful thing to see him play. I'm looking forward to seeing him get some buckets in person a couple of nights this season, being in Chicago like I am. So. I think that there's an opportunity there where he'd be able to build his brand even more. I mean, obviously he's concentrating on his studies and picking up a new sport right now. But I mean, I think there's an opportunity for him, obviously at the next level, if lacrosse is what he chooses to do, to be a really big name in the sport, both in terms of what he does off the field and what he does on it.
Yeah, interesting for sure. Chris, thank you so much for the perspective tonight. We appreciate it.
Anytime.